I've been making my way very slowly through Dogen's collection of koans, and I'm just picking the ones that feel alive for me. Many of them, at least by koan standards, are kind of obscure. They're not the big famous ones, the ones that we might bump into if we're reading an introductory book about Zen. But within that collection also there are some that are really huge. And today I wanted to talk about one that's really big. This is case 101. I've heard people talk about this in Japan many times, and it stands out for me in part because they all talk about it in a different way. So we could talk about this one tonight, and then the next night, and the next night, and the next night for a long time, and just choose a different angle, and then another angle, and then another angle. There's a lot here. It goes like this. Zen master Huairang of Nanyue went to study with the Sixth Ancestor, Dajian Huineng. The Sixth Ancestor said, "Where are you from?" And it's important to notice from the beginning that this is a story about Huineng, and Huineng is a big, big deal. So Huineng said, "Where are you from?" Nanyue said, "I came from national teacher Huian of Songshan." The sixth ancestor, Huineng, said, "What is it that has come like this?" Nanyue could not answer. He attended on the master for 8 years and worked on the question. One day he said to Huineng, "Now I understand it. When I first came to study with you, you asked me, 'What is it that has come like this?'" Huineng said, "How do you understand it?" Nanyue said, "To say it's like something misses it." The sixth ancestor, Huineng, said, "Does it depend upon practice and enlightenment?" Nanyue said, "It's not that there is no practice and enlightenment. It's just that they cannot be defiled." The sixth ancestor said, "Just this non-defilement is what Buddhas have maintained and transmitted. You are like this. I am like this. Ancestors in India were like this." It's kind of long, but we'll break it down. Nanyue shows up, and Huineng says, "Where have you come from?" And he says, "I came from this other temple, from this other teacher." And then Huineng asks, "What is it that has come like this?" And if you're familiar with koan literature, you may have heard this written in another way. I think it's more often translated as something like, "What is it that thus comes?" Which brings us to the idea of the Tathagata, who is the one who thus comes. What is it that comes like this? And it's personalized here because he just asked, "Where did you come from?" "Well, I came from over there." What is it that comes like this? And Nanyue is stumped, completely stumped. And as in so many of these conversations, if we can step back for a moment from the content, from the punchline, from whatever that is, we can rest in a kind of awe about the approach, the dynamic, the practice of these people, these characters. Nanyue came to visit this temple and was asked a question, and he recognized first that this question was important. He understood that this was not a casual question. and in the same breath recognized that he didn't know the answer to such a degree that he wasn't even going to try. And because he recognized that this is important, and because he recognized that he didn't know the answer, he made this next leap, which was to stay there with this teacher, because this is important. And he stayed with this teacher and was an attendant to this teacher, Huineng, for 8 years. And then, after 8 years, he goes back to Huineng and he says, now I understand it. And you can imagine in this moment, Huineng, his face, thinking, what? What do you understand? We don't know if this moment was a critical moment for Huineng when he asked this question. But for Nanyue, it was everything. He says, when I came here the first time, you asked me this question, and reveals in this moment that this is what he's been doing. This is what he's been sitting on all this time, trying to unravel this thing. Whatever happens next in the story, there's something remarkable about this student. He says, now I understand it. And Huineng says, how do you understand it? Nanyue says, to say it's like something misses it. The question was, what is it that has come like this? Nanyue says, like this is a problem. This is one of those moments where it might just be best to stop. Because in many ways, this is about language. And so everything that I say next just reinforces the problem. When Bodhidharma says that this is a transmission beyond words and letters, there's a recognition that when we talk about things, we're pointing at the things. We're trying to get people to understand what the things are. And so we bring in other things. We bring in analogy. We bring in metaphor. We say it's as red as this. In so many ways, we say that something is like something else because that's how we understand what experience is. If you're describing a taste to someone and the person has never tried that thing before, immediately you say, well, it's kind of like this, right? You know this one, and then you combine it with this, and now you have an idea. Well, we describe movies this way. If this movie meets this movie. And in this way, with the best of intentions, we create frameworks for things by which people can imagine that they understand the thing. But it's not the thing. It's the story about it. And as long as there's a story about it, I'm out here and it's over here. To say that it's like this misses the point. Begs the question, what's the point? If I'm going to experience anything, if I'm going to observe anything, if I'm going to be part of anything, without going to that place in my mind that tries to make sense of it in relationship to the things that I already know, I'm in really interesting territory. Dogen speaks of the idea of a Dharma position. The things exist there in their own spot. And it's a really hard idea because it's kind of like a counterbalance to interdependence. We can look at any moment, we can look at any person, any situation, and we can say, everything about this is dependent on everything else. And in saying that, we build a story, a complicated story, right? One that's too complex for us to see, but one where we say, this is here because of blank. And that nothing about this is autonomous. It's just made up of parts. And Buddhism would say that's really true. That's a really important perspective. And Dogen offers this other perspective, and he's not alone. This says this moment doesn't have to be understood in terms of before and after. It doesn't have to be dependent on something else to be whole. Including the something else of me. If I look up and I see the moon in the sky, I don't have to contextualize it for it to be complete. I don't have to understand it in terms of waxing and waning. I don't have to know even what it is. It is. And I am. And when I say it's like this other thing, I suddenly step back a million miles. So this is his understanding. This is Nanyue's understanding. That the comparison part, the contextualizing part, makes the question not work. It's not exactly an answer to the question. It's a response. And then Huineng, in classic form, decides, I'm going to test this a little bit. And so he says, oh, okay. Does it depend on practice and enlightenment? Or what we would call practice verification, which, as we know, is at the heart of the whole practice. So this thing, this truth that we're talking about, does it rest on practice verification? And Nanyue says, it's not that there is no practice verification. Here it's defined as practice and enlightenment. It says, it's just that they cannot be defiled. Which, in the way that I want to talk about it today, is just repeating what he just said. It's a trick question. Does it depend upon practice and enlightenment? Suggests that it is separate from practice and enlightenment. The practice and enlightenment form the foundation of something. That if we take up practice and enlightenment, if we take up practice verification, if we imagine that we can, take up practice verification as something there, that then it serves us in some way, or it forms a kind of base layer for something else that then rests upon it. Nanyue says, no, it's not that there's no such thing. It's that it cannot be defiled. And it cannot be defiled because it can't be separated from something else. I can't defile it because I'm not separate from it. This it that they're talking about cannot depend on it, because that would mean the practice verification is over there and it is over here. So together they're circling in different ways the idea of wholeness. A wholeness that is fairly radical, right? This idea of depending is, I think, a very juicy one. If we ask ourselves, what do I depend upon? What depends on me? Nanyue says, there's something false in that too. Something that undermines the completeness of whatever it is. And unlike so many of these stories where the student gets it wrong and the teacher gets it right and then the student gets it, they come together completely. This is a student who was so open, so ready. He hears the question, he waits. And when he sees it, he presents. Huineng tests him, he presents again, and then Huineng says, just this non-defilement is what Buddhas have maintained and transmitted. He's saying, what you're talking about, this is what they've all been talking about. This is exactly that thing. He says, you are like this. I am like this. Ancestors in India were like this. And he's tweaking it, right? Because he's finishing with like this. You got it. You understood it. You took the like this out. That's exactly right. You're just like that. I'm just like that. They've all been just like that. Because we can't not say that. But we can know as we say it that we're missing the mark. That's where I'll stop.